Good afternoon, everybody. You may notice the change of scenery back here. That's just because I'm actually pet sitting right now. But that is besides the point. The point is that we have a lot to talk about, particularly with the severe weather possibilities this afternoon. Well, mainly this evening more than anything. And I actually think that our possibility of severe weather has increased slightly. I still think it's low, but the environment from what I've looked at does look slightly better than it did yesterday. But we will get more into that later. For now, let's just take a look at our 500 millibar chart. And here we see the devious little trough that is responsible for the severe weather. Now, it really isn't going to be super immediately over our area. We're pretty far removed from the jet streak, but a lot of those winds aloft are still moving over our area, which is why we're still going to have some decent wind shear in place, which is going to help storms rotate. But this trough is also going to help spur on some more severe weather in a pretty large stretch of the country, from Iowa down to Texas. Uh, Definitely under the gun for severe weather. Now, as we move on, some stronger winds as we head into tomorrow morning will overspread our area, and that jet streak will get closer. And eventually, we are going to see we're going to see multiple rounds. And as this froth and jet streak gets closer to our area, it's going to bring more rounds of precipitation. And eventually, as we head through tomorrow evening, that will begin to move across and out of our area. And then it looks like there's another little trough to our northwest as we head into Sunday morning. But it seems like that is going to largely remain to our north and have impacts to our north, but it is going to be another thing to watch, just in case. Now let's head down to the 700 millibar level just to make sure there's not anything sneaky going on. And yeah, not really. I mean, not really anything sneaky, nothing that we didn't see. Again, this trough coming in tomorrow afternoon is probably going to kick up another round of disturbed weather. And something that I'm noticing, I started to see it on the 500, but I got distracted, but I'm seeing it on the 700 too. So let's go back to the 500 really quick. Is that it seems like, hello? Excuse me? Can we go back? Okay, let's give it a moment. Oh, there it is. Okay, never mind. Is that this trough kind of gets so elongated that part of it gets cut off, and we end up with a cutoff low down in the southwest here. So that doesn't really mean anything for us. I just think it's interesting and wanted to point that out. Now let's jump all the way down to the 850 millibar level. I don't think there's going to be too much new here, but one thing I do want to keep an eye on are these low-level winds alongside the edge of the low-pressure system. Uh, that is the low-level jet, and I think it could play a role. And as you can see this afternoon, we are kind of in an area of higher wind speeds at the low levels. And if you'll remember from our 500 millibar chart, the winds aloft were more coming out of this way, whereas lower down they're more that way. And so we are having some turning with height, and that of course is wind shear and will allow any storm that develops to rotate. And again, we do have some pretty strong winds for this level, about 40 knots that is. So that's pretty good. And then we'll have even stronger winds overspreading the area as we head into tomorrow morning. So again, that's just something to keep in mind, and we'll come into play a bit later. Now let's head to the surface. I know some of you have woke up this morning and were like, really severe weather? It's not warm though. It's actually, I mean, granted it's warmer than winter, but it's not very warm. Well, trust me, that warm area is coming, and it will come in uh, pretty rapidly, and right at the right time too. So, and it looks like it should stick around for most of tomorrow as well. But then, of course, we do have a cold front that punches behind this system as we head into tomorrow afternoon, or mid to late afternoon tomorrow and into the evening, and that'll make me a little bit sad, but that's what's going to happen. So, but now let's zoom in a bit and actually take a look at our, temperatures. So, even though they haven't really gone up much yet, those temperatures will start to rise. And by 7 p.m., we should be mid to upper 50s, getting close to 60 degrees. And temperatures will actually gradually warm as we head towards tomorrow morning. And by 7 a.m., we should be above 60 degrees. And it is possible that at some point tomorrow afternoon we could get close to the mid 60s. So I bet, especially closer to the Detroit area, that'll certainly feel quite nice. Then, of course, that cold front starts to come through, and by 7 a.m. Sunday, we are unfortunately back to the low 30s. Yeah, I'm not actually very happy about that. But thing is now it's time to move on to our discussion about severe weather. Before we do that, though, this is our current radar. You do see that we have some pretty good thunderstorms off to our west, kind of mainly heading towards the Grand Rapids area and just south of the Grand Rapids area. I think these will steer clear of the Lansing metro and eventually move off to our north. If they grow a little bit on the south end, that could be a different story. But something that's catching my eye right now is this little blip down by Kalamazoo and Portage. That, if that continues to develop and grow into a storm, would move up into our area. So that is something to keep an eye on. And of course, if this, oops, I accidentally switched radar sites there. I didn't mean to do that. If, of course, this little blip does grow into a proper thunderstorm, that would probably move into the Lansing area within the next hour or two. So by 1 to 2 p.m. or 1:30, I should say, 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. is when you would expect that particular cell to move through if it does develop into something. Now, before I dive into my own personal forecast for the severe weather today, I want to show you the official Storm Prediction Center forecast, or at least their official outlook, and they do have us in a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk. So again, the risk isn't generally that significant for us. It's not a super high risk, but this risk will carry with it the threat, even if it is a low threat, for all 3 severe hazards. So that's tornadoes, damaging winds, and hail. Now, personally, the 2 hazards that I think are most likely for today are going to be hail and actually tornadoes. But even then, I still think those are going to be on the low end, in terms of probability. I think there could reasonably be a tornado or 2 across the state, but, you never know. And again, the risk is low. I think out of all 3, the greatest threat is probably for hail. And even then, that threat is still pretty low. The technical discussion, I know this is quite wordy here, does mention our area as well, mentioning some risk for at least isolated / severe damaging gusts may persist late tonight into early Saturday morning across Wisconsin, Illinois, and lower Michigan if certain clusters of storms can maintain intensity. Although one of the caveats to that is that instability may become more limited with eastward extent there. So maybe we don't see some of those stronger wind gusts overnight. But we also, in a previous outlook, they did mention us specifically as well. I have that I can't show it up right here right now, but I did take a screenshot on my phone in which they said additional storms are expected along the warm front across parts of Illinois, Indiana, and into southern lower Michigan. And while instability will be weaker, low-level shear will favor rotating storms and perhaps some tornado risk. So that is again the Storm Prediction Center talking about and highlighting many of the same things I mentioned yesterday in my previous forecast video. Now we are going to take a look at some of the individual member models in the HREF, which is kind of like an ensemble or blend of models. So we'll take a look at the simulated reflectivity radar in some of the member models. This one shows some of that current activity to our north, and it does show more building to the south and potentially moving through our area. And then interestingly, it looks like around 6 or 7 p.m., we can see some more isolated storms, though those do appear to be just to our north. And then we do have some calm period overnight before we get more precipitation and perhaps more storms as we head into early parts of tomorrow morning. This is right around 6 again, 6 or 7 a.m. So I guess just remember 6, 7 p.m., 6, 7 a.m. Now, of course, that's not set in stone. A little bit, we could still have some storms a little bit past 6 or 7 p.m. this evening. Although, again, it does look like mainly just to our north. But don't take too much stock in the exact location. The simulated reflectivity just kind of helps to give us an idea of coverage in the general region in which these storms may be. So those storms could end up being a little bit farther to the north, or they could end up a little bit farther to the south down in our area. So don't completely discount it just because it looks like it's a county to our north. Now, if we look here, it's kind of the same story. Is certainly much of the same story, although it brings the morning round of precipitation maybe just an hour or so later. Model is a bit less bullet. No, I would say it still shows much of the same, just in a different way. Less of a cellular mode in the evening. And then again, that next round in the morning, again, maybe an hour or so later than the initial model. This one also showing that, though it does show a little gap in our area. And this one is also okay. This one is showing more of a cellular mode for the evening storms, which would be more favorable for hail and tornadoes. Now, this model is known for exaggerating a little bit, so this may not quite be reality. But something to note here is that it is showing some of those isolated styles farther to the south. So again, that's giving some credence to the idea that just because it's showing these just a tad to our north and to our west doesn't mean that we're immune to the action here. And then this showing much of the same. This is kind of showing that maybe that little cell that we picked up near the Kalamazoo area might grow a little bit and move up our way. At least according to this one, we'll just have to see if that ends up being the case. And it really doesn't show much for the evening round at all. But it does show that morning round coming in, although this one is a couple hours slower, so maybe closer to 8 a.m., 8 or 9 a.m., if this one ends up being correct. Now we'll pivot over to this site really quick, mainly so that I can get a look at the environment using some modeled soundings. Now these get pretty technical, so I don't expect you to really understand what most of this means, but let's start with this chart on the left here. This white dotted line is kind of the path any sort of bubble or amount of air is expected to take as it rises through the atmosphere. The red line is the temperature, the green line is the dew point or the moisture, and the distance between the red line and this white line is our CAPE, or convective available potential energy, which is basically our fuel for thunderstorms. It's our instability. And this is a pretty narrow profile for CAPE. Now, it's workable. You can get severe weather with this. And in fact, I think it looks slightly more impressive than it did when we were looking at this yesterday. In fact, we do see some most unstable and forecast CAPE values near or above 1,000, which is definitely more than we were looking at yesterday. Now, what really catches my eye is this photograph on the right here. This shape is very ideal. Well, maybe not very ideal, but it's ideal. It is a good shape for supercells. And supercells are just rotating thunderstorms. Now, of course, not every supercell is going to produce a tornado, but the vast majority of tornadoes do come from supercells. So, and of course, the rotating nature of these updrafts will also help with hail production. We see with our right down here, this tiny little number, 3 CAPE is 63, which is, again, for tornadoes, workable. And 3 CAPE is just kind of the CAPE in the lowest levels of the atmosphere. And also what okay, I'm having a moment. Apparently, I can't speak. What really piques my interest is our storm relative helicity values, or SRH, down here. Surface to 1 kilometer, which is low level, is almost 400. Surface to 3 kilometer, which is a larger layer, 500. And even our effective inflow layer, which is kind of like what the storm will actually be feeling, is at a solid 200. And those are some pretty impressive values, especially the 4 and 500. And that is more indicative again of wind shear and the capacity of storms to rotate and spin. Now, this white dotted line going back to this chart is not quite based at the surface because we do have a tiny little bulge in the in the temperatures here. So there's a little warm layer aloft that could kind of prevent air at the surface from rising, and maybe these storms are going to initiate from little bubbles of air that are a little bit higher up, and that could be a problem if you're looking for tornado development. However, with these strong storm relative helicity values, the rotation in the storm is sometimes able to create an upward force that overcomes that and allows the storm to begin drawing air from the surface anyway. So I'm actually really not that worried about that in particular, and I do think that storms could reasonably become what we call surface-based in this environment. So is it like an extremely impressive environment? No, not in the slightest. But it is an environment where I look at that and I go, yeah, okay, I could see a tornado occurring there, or yeah, I could see a few hail reports coming in. It's like, again, it's a marginal environment, not impressive by any means, but it's still an environment where I look at that and go, yeah, okay, I can see, for example, I can see why we're in a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk. I can see why we're in a 2% tornado risk and a 5% hail risk. I get it. It makes sense. Now, one thing I will note is let's actually pull up our mixed layer cape here. Just to give a visualization, this is kind of the instability in the air. And you'll notice that the instability is a little better to our southwest, kind of closer to the Kalamazoo area. And if we take a quick look, you can see that these cape profiles are a little bit thicker. And this is an environment that I think is even a little bit more favorable for tornadoes than our environment in the Lansing area. You have 125 3 cape, which is pretty good. Most unstable cape of 1500, mixed layer cape of 1000, forecast cape 2000. Those are all plenty. Surface cape even is getting up to 600, which is pretty good, or at least decent. I shouldn't say pretty good. It's workable. Photograph still looks pretty good. And this, I think, is definitely a more favorable environment for tornadoes. If you showed me the previous sounding that was over our area, I'd be like, yeah, okay. This one, I'm like, yeah, oh, yeah. So, I think the threat for tornadoes is a little bit higher towards southwest. Now, as we go through the overnight, some of this instability will make its way into our area, and our profiles will become a little bit better. But I think the main round of storms will be past our area by this time, and this will help to serve some of the later storms that'll come through more in the morning time. Now, one thing I do want to talk about before we leave the topic of severe weather is while I do think the highest threat for severe weather will come with any storms that develop this evening, I think that the morning round is more of a guarantee for us. It's not a guarantee whatsoever, but I think it's more likely, I should say, that we actually get those storms. And while the severe threat with those storms I think will be lower, there will still be a severe threat with them, especially if they're in a more linear orientation, and if they're able to hold on to more of the instability that they had earlier, then they could be a bit more severe. And there will still be a threat for damaging winds and even a quick spin up tornado or two with that morning round. Now we are going to move on and take a look at our winds. So winds are today going to be hanging around 10 or 15 miles per hour. So of course, Unless a severe thunderstorm blows through, then they might be locally higher, but these are just the regular sustained background winds we're talking about here. And even through the night, they should remain pretty stable, but as we head into tomorrow morning, they will pick up quite a bit, looking at perhaps up to 20 miles per hour. And then even as we head further into the day tomorrow afternoon, we could see wind get up to 25 miles per hour before it starts to die down. And by Sunday morning, the background winds are back down to a nice, pretty stable 10 miles per hour. Now, of course, that's just the sustained winds. The gusts could get a bit higher. In fact, as early as this afternoon, we could see some gusts up into the 20 mile per hour range, perhaps even getting close to 30 miles per hour as we head into this evening time. Getting up to 40 miles per hour as we get closer to the morning hours, and remaining that way as that first round of storms, or that second round of storms tomorrow morning moves through. And then even afterwards, wind gusts of 30 to 40 miles per hour hanging around until they start to move out in the late afternoon, evening time. And then by Sunday morning, wind gusts, still hanging around the 20 to 25 mile an hour mark. So it may be quite a gusty period, even without the thunderstorms. So that is just something to keep in mind as we go forward. Now, of course, we're going to get into cloud cover. It's cloudy now. We may see some breaks as we head into the evening, of course, reliant on whether or not there are storms overhead. Now, we will have some clearing and some clear spots overnight in between rounds of storms. Then, of course, we'll have clouds in the morning with that morning round of storms that moves through. We'll have clouds for most of tomorrow afternoon and into the evening time. And then they'll start to clear out as we head into the overnight hours. And it should be pretty sunny as we head into Sunday morning. That's all I have for today. Stay safe, stay weather aware, and I'll see you tomorrow.